Hi, I'm Bryce Perry, and early episode is in the business of hot takes. I like to start each episode with a hot take, and mostly to get the vibes going, but this week's hot take is actually regarding hot takes, and I think I'd like to plan not to start with anything too hot, as we're just getting going, and maybe there's some sort of consideration that each idea is marginally hot, and depending on how close I'm getting to the edge of our whims towards progression and ideological new held factions, there's a scale or a degree that should be considered, and to be careful about not getting too hot or too cold should be in everyone's well-standing decree. So, without further ado, here ends the pilot episode, and try not to overcook the meat. Glossary. What began as a play on the word thought, with a T missing at the end, thos, and then with insight jumped to glossary. Bridge the gap into an available comparison with glossary, and finding the root of that word to be glossa, with the meaning of tongue, it invites one to think that thosa might be seen as the mind's tongue, the area of the brain that articulates the motion of an ideological center in our common understanding of the world in which we live. I seek to explore the current occurrency of normal typicality within our mental modes of cognition. I've recorded sound bites to the sound effects of various frequent happenings that I believe will most help a shaping of advance into further parts of speech by looking at where those words of ours start, the events of change that give us pause. I will use those effects in effect to build each weekly episode onto a based segmentation of what comes to inspire best a partition of the week's news and considerable perspective writings that with every prayerful sighting might bring an evolved ability to adorn our expressions of the language and use with greater fluidity and meaning and complexity toward progression. So, with each episode building a more developed approach and ultimately a larger sequencing of our communication, I will examine the bigger points of view and present a glossary of thinking that, with diligence, aligns missing pieces to the puzzle that is society's confusing mix of histories in a form that I think helps put edge to edge and befitting in many flexibilities, gives access to deeper purposing when it seems most impossible at present to see music in the messy with any clarity. Glossary. So, as a pilot episode, I've planned to give an outline of some of those initial sound bites that I have and describe some of these questioned parts of speech that I've encoded as just day-to-day sound effects. And the plan for each week will always be to have a central theme as much as I continue to include different pieces of news or tidbits from my research that altogether brings a point that is the take-home on just the inspired and ideally prophetic aspects of my transgressions. The intro segment will always be a primary idea that I've more or less concatenated, and by that I mean sort of drawn the pieces together with, and however long each of these episodes go is very much at the discretion of the time and the spacing and possibly general implicative impulse towards speaking. I've taken some time to get going with these, and that intro soundbite will be one I will continue to use as a refined, focusing, general mix of the common themes here. And as the episodes go on, I do plan to record other sound bites that do seem more particularly inspired and developing in my awarenesses. But for now, I have 5, I think, and we will just come to see exactly kind of how that goes. I think segmentation of podcasts are generally critical element towards the flow of one's focus. And did I hear somebody at the door? This week's hunch. Gosh, so this was the first soundbite that I heard, quote on the spirit, and made me think immediately to the Hunchback. Actually, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, most notoriously, notably, notorious, notoriously. If you're unfamiliar with us, the OUS ending, I have found that a lot of times that is kind of representative of a superfluous quality that is so adorned with that suffix. And the hunch, this week's hunch, the knock knock at the door, is a segment that I plan to have in every episode, and one that is a rough insight of the particularities that the week's ideas have maybe spurred, something that is me trying to put a finger on something, to be so frank. And this week's hunch is very loaded, but look forward to instances of insight that, again, are relatively things that seem like something on the coming fold of our interpretations, whether it be in world politics or the possible sense to give a little bit more credence to something that I feel is largely in a state of gridlocked debate. Something that I feel will definitely usher in a whole new ideological identity to our perspective picture that we're working on. The Card Shuffle. Welcome to the part of the show that seeks to blend the two polarities of overarching influence into a common whole. When we play card games, there are 52 different characters in which there's an importance to flush out into the occurrence, the happening of the apparent natured playing of a game. And when I think about the mixing of the cards, I think there's an easy hold to grab onto that the primary point of its presentation rests a purposed point of its particular manifold, and the information that is relevant to the mixing of a deck, I think, will, with dedication, attempt to put the two sides together in such a way that the game can continue to be played and that puts our varied, sometimes opposing points of view side by side, and upon that action, there is the ability to say that everything is all and fair and square, and no one holds necessarily an advantage, but the characterizations of those cards can uphold their initial reality, that consequently allows the game to be played as it should be. Does that make you want to curl up and get a good book out? Or do you feel like maybe you're a cat? I've recorded previous elements, parts, tracks. I'm going to repeat some words. I hope you just understand that I think they're coming from a loving place and can be interpreted as words that I think about a little bit more on the regular. But that being said, I think this segment is going to be drawn into an area where there's something that is more uplifting. I recorded that as the click of a lamp. So there's a little bit of a turning on the light, and as with all of the music and the sound that I record, there is a special inspiration that I honor and I hope comes to life as I do so. And in this particular recording, I felt inclined to sort of do a little bit of a tap, and it reminded me of that kind of call to a dog or a cat that is a common signal for, here, come hop up, or, over here. And I try to respect that in a way that extends to my whole life. And there's a management of my intimacies, I think, that is integral to so incorporate such an honesty. Though I hope to see in this segment different sides of the good, and to pinpoint some of the things that need even maybe a critical or a harsh point of view, as when we turn on the lights, it can be blinding and we have to adjust to seeing things with that new source of photons. And there is all the more of your insights and viewpoints that can hopefully be garnered in some of my pauses. Because as I have notated in the intro segment, that there is the parts of speech that bring change and give us pause. That last segment came like I was having to breathe in and I don't know, swallow some degree of a future that was too big for the past that I already was trying to stand on, that it just about blew me over. But yeah, the light switch. Did you have to wake up? The first thing that I want to pick out about the alarm sound is that these started off as branches to this thought about a part of speech. And so if you think, okay, in what part of my speech am I giving some sort of precedented alarm, some sort of notice that is needing to be called upon or turned off? And the aspect of that speech part, that speech little bubble, gosh, I know you're gonna hear that chingy 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 of the cat. The speech, the spoken aspects of our words that are unidentified presently are aspects that are more archaic than the word forms than we have already. And if you apply that idea to the other parts of speech that maybe you've already thought to, there's a sense of uncovering. Son of a bitch. We're gonna keep all of that. And the alarms, right? We need to know when there's something bad going on. And gosh, well, might we find them all? The suspect at large has left the vicinity. This is the part of the show that hopefully feels like coming home. And I recorded it as a door unlocked, and ideologically, we thought all to hopefully leave that as something that was maybe much like The Hunch, but something more like a entrance into an area that was once secured and left out of the public eye, ironically. And I think at this point, knowing what I've created for that final sound, I think I like the idea of trying to make that kind of like the take home. And with its melancholic air, I think maybe could also lead it into a place that is more about something that is an unfortunate step into our future, although it is our home and it is something that we need to embrace and work through. There are the things that still need our time and attention and our caring spirit. And the hopeful elements, might they abide in the inspirations as much as the parts that seem to be breathing down my back and the threats.